the environment that we were designed for as humans thousands of years ago is not the same as the environment that we're currently in. And that difference between the environment that we have now and the environment that we are supposed to be in causes clashes. So the smartest sleep routine strikes a balance between modern technology, because we live in a modern society, and also having some of the key factors that actually allow us to sleep properly. When I developed this routine, I felt like I was able to have stability in the rest of my life, because once you can figure out your sleep, a lot of other things just fix themselves. If you have random issues, like you can't focus or stuff like that, your sleep isn't optimized, you should probably look at your sleep first, and then it might solve a lot of those issues. So that's why I want to share this routine with you, because I've seen it have such a profound impact on my life. And if you can even implement half of this routine into your day-to-day, your life is going to be significantly better. So we're going to start in the morning, because what you do in the morning actually has a pretty important effect on how you're going to sleep the upcoming night. After you wake up, it is very important that you get sufficient sun exposure, because if you think about this from our ancestors' perspective, they didn't have all these beautiful houses, they didn't have all this architecture that would block the sun from them. Or if they did have architecture, they used sun as their primary source of light. But because we're indoors a lot now, we lose out on a lot of the sun that we get into our eyes. And it turns out that, particularly in the morning, it sets your circadian rhythm for the rest of the day. Not just right in the morning, it sets it for the night and also how you're going to sleep and wake up the next day. So it's very important that within the first hour, you get the right amount of sun exposure, or else your circadian rhythm is going to be somewhat random. And this can actually be somewhat, causational is a tricky word, but it won't help you if you are suffering from conditions like anxiety or depression, because one characteristic of those disorders is disrupted cortisol releases. And the way that your body sets the timings for those types of hormones to get released is by seeing the sun. So you might be asking, how much sun do you need to set that clock in the morning? So it can vary depending on the weather. The simplest thing that I can recommend to you is on sunny mornings, you get 5 to 10 minutes of sun exposure. And if it is cloudy outside, then I suggest you bump that up to 15 to 30 minutes, okay? There's a couple ways that you can get this sun exposure. However, I suggest you don't do it through windows, simply because if you're looking through a window, it's a box, right? But your field of view is not this big. Your field of view is 180 degrees up and down to the, so if you're looking through a window, you're losing so much of that field of view of the light that's coming in. So it's important that you actually get outside and see the sun, because you're going to be losing a lot of light just by looking through a window. And you can do this by going in your yard or just going outside somehow. I personally just go on a walk for 10 to 30 minutes, and that's how I get my sun exposure. I'm not quite sure if this actually influences your sleep rhythm in any direct way, but it is clear that when you take a cold shower, your cortisol spikes. And interestingly enough, the main hormone that tells your body it's time to wake up is cortisol. So if you wake up and then take a cold shower, you can artificially get that even higher than it typically is, and you're going to have higher levels of alertness early in the day. And if you're particularly one of those people who wake up and you're kind of just really groggy and you're not really into it, if you take a cold shower for just even 5 or 10 minutes, you can get a significant boost in mental clarity early in the day. I'm going to show you what is called the 3-2-1 method. And this is something that I pulled from Ali Abdaal, and I just think it's super simple. And I think that when something is simple, sometimes it can be more useful, because when things get really complicated, the input energy that you need for something to be useful increases. So if you can dumb it down, but have it still have the main things that are useful, then you can still get most of your bang for the buck with a lot less effort. When you eat food, your stomach needs to move it around and digest it. And when that happens, blood gets directed into your stomach, okay? And the thing is, that is going to require your heart to pump, and also it's going to redirect blood from other areas that could have been using it. So you still might be able to sleep after you eat, but the thing is, if you are digesting food when you're sleeping, the blood that would be directed towards recovering your brain, your muscles, whatever it is going to be used for digestion. And you don't need to be a rocket scientist to understand that that's not very efficient. Simply just don't eat 3 hours before you go to bed. Super simple. Now, a problem that I used to have was I would wake up in the middle of the night and I would need to go to the bathroom, or I would be too thirsty. And if you really think about it and you do the math, if you wake up every other night to go to the bathroom, you're losing about 2 hours of sleep every week. So it's fairly simple. Just don't drink 2 hours before you go to bed. But this also poses a question: how much water should you have already drinking before you go to bed? Drinking, that's a great word. So on screen, I'm going to have formulas for imperial and also metric, but if you just try to get that amount of water in before the cutoff point, you'll find that you're hydrated enough to just not drink for the rest of the night until you wake up the next morning. Now, if you look around online, a lot of people recommend just to cut out screen usage, and it's not necessarily a bad recommendation, but I don't think that it encapsulates the big picture of what's actually happening. So your nervous system has no clue what an iPhone is. The only thing that it understands is it's seeing light, and it's like, oh, I see light, so the sun must be coming up. So if you're doing that at nighttime, your body doesn't understand that it's a fake light. It thinks it's the sun. So if you take a step back and look big picture, you don't just want to be avoiding light from your phones. You want to be avoiding light from your ceiling fans. You want to be avoiding light in your bathroom. Like, you turn those lights off and maybe you can get those little tiny night lights that aren't super bright. And also, avoiding technology for the last hour that you're going to sleep is going to have a benefit. And now, I'm not going to lie, I'm not perfect. So sometimes I do go on my computer for the last hour that I am awake, but I do some things that mitigate the negative effects of that screen exposure. So I'm going to share them with you. So if you're on a computer, this works on PC and Mac, you can use something called f.lux. And what it does is, according to the time of the day, it turns on a blue light filter, and you can set the strength of it. So what I personally do is I have that on my computer, and then I also just turn the brightness down as low as possible. And you can do the same thing on your phone. It's a lot easier to do it on your phone. You just turn on the blue light filter and also just turn the brightness down. When you do that, it can significantly mitigate the negative effects of using your technology, because it's not outputting as much light. So a problem that I personally used to have, and I still have sometimes, is that I am too amped up to actually get in bed and fall asleep. And I've developed a backup plan if you are too alert, you could say, to get in bed and fall asleep. And it is something called down regulation breathing. And the reason that you would want to do this is because when you breathe in certain patterns, it can lower your levels of alertness. So it essentially just calms you down, which gets you ready to go to bed. And I have videos that explain this in more depth in the cards if you're interested in learning about that, but I'm just going to keep it fairly simple for this video. So the way that you want to do this is you just want to lay down on the floor, just completely relax your body, and it simply is just focusing on making your exhales longer than your inhales. So a pretty simple way that you can do this is by inhaling through your nose and then exhaling through very thin lips, because when your lips are thin, it makes it really hard to have your exhales be shorter than your inhales. So if you just breathe like this, like these thin lips, and that works if you're anxious, that works if you just got back from a run or something. It works for a lot of things. So if you ever need to just calm down to get into bed and fall asleep quicker, that's a really useful tool. So I used to wake up every single morning and my mouth would be so dry, and I didn't realize that was a big issue. And if you are sleeping and you wake up with a dry mouth, you should probably pay attention to this. Because if you are breathing through your mouth when you're sleeping, it raises the risk that you're going to be snoring. It raises the probability that you're going to have sleep apnea. And these things are not good for your sleep quality and just not good for your general health. Because if you're fighting for breathing properly when you're sleeping, it doesn't take a scientist to understand that that's going to hurt your sleep and hurt your general health. And also, if you don't realize this, when you're snoring, if you snore or you hear someone snore, that is choking. That's what choking sounds like. Because if you're like this, that's literally your throat flapping on itself and it's not breathing properly. So you may ask what the solution of this is. And the number one thing that you want to do is focus on trying to nasal breathe when you're sleeping instead of using your mouth. And when you nasal breathe, that has shown significant efficacy in preventing sleep apnea. It prevents snoring in almost everyone. And it also just drastically enhances your sleep quality. And you may ask, how do you make sure that you're not mouth breathing when you're sleeping? So I explain this in a lot of my other videos, but if you use medical tape or something, this is called micropore tape. There's a couple other things you can use, and if you just simply put a little bit of this tape on, just like this, you can still breathe. Like, I can still talk like this, and that's not covering your entire mouth because that can be dangerous, but if it's just a little bit, it gives it a little bit of resistance, which promotes you nasal breathing. And there's also a problem where you might think that your nose is too stuffed to actually start nasal breathing, but The thing with your nose is that the more that you breathe through your nose, your nasal passageways actually expand. But if you don't use your nose for a while, they can actually close up. But if you force yourself to use it, they will develop in a sense, and that will help you nasal breathe more so in the future. So it's important that you actually, if you struggle to nasal breathe at night, you focus on if you're nasal breathing during the day, because if you practice nasal breathing during the day, then your nasal passageways will expand, which will make it easier for you to nasal breathe at night and in general. So if you could learn anything from this video that's going to benefit you, I ask that you just drop a subscription on the channel. It's a completely free way to support the community, and also you'll get more videos like this in the future. Thank you for your time, and I hope that you can get 1% better today.